Drop your location in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. There's something about knowing someone out there is hearing this that makes it easier to say out loud. My name is Sophie Tremblay. I'm 31 years old. I live in a one-bedroom condo in Vancouver that I bought myself at 28. And for exactly 26 months, I let my older sister move in and slowly take over every corner of my life. My space, my groceries, my credit card, my sleep, and eventually, my sense of what was normal. This is the story of how I got it all back, and how I did it with a spreadsheet. I know, not exactly the dramatic ending most people expect, but I've learned that the quietest things can hit the hardest. My sister's name is Danielle. She's 5 years older than me, which means she was 34 when she showed up at my door on a Thursday night in October with 2 suitcases, a cardboard box of kitchen stuff, and her 7-year-old daughter, Zoe, holding a stuffed rabbit named Carrot. I remember thinking Carrot was adorable. I remember thinking this would be fine. Danielle had just separated from her husband, Mark. Not a dramatic split, no screaming, no affairs, just 2 people who had grown into completely different directions and finally admitted it. She was the one who moved out. Mark kept the house in Burnaby. Danielle had 3 months of savings, a part-time bookkeeping job she'd been doing from home for years, and no apartment lined up yet. "Just until I find something," she said at the door. 2 months, maybe 3. I just need to get my feet under me. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. Of course I did. She was my sister. Zoe was 7 and confused and holding a stuffed rabbit. What was I supposed to say? I want to be clear about something, because I've had a lot of time to think about this. I didn't say yes out of naivety. I knew Danielle. I knew her patterns. I knew that she had a way of making temporary things permanent, of letting deadlines slide past without ever quite acknowledging them. I had watched her do it with our parents for years, borrowing money she'd pay back next month, staying in the guest room just 1 more week. I knew all of that. I said yes anyway, because she was my sister, and her daughter was scared, and I told myself I was different from our parents. I told myself I'd hold the line. I didn't. The first month was actually fine. Danielle slept on my pull-out couch. Zoe slept beside her. They were quiet, considerate, and I genuinely enjoyed having company in a space that had started to feel a little too silent since my last relationship ended. Danielle cooked a few times, cleaned up without being asked, and spent her days on the phone with rental agencies and scanning listings on her laptop. We had dinner together almost every night. Zoe would draw pictures at my coffee table while Danielle and I talked the way we used to when we were teenagers. Honestly and without guard. For a few weeks, it felt like something I didn't realize I'd been missing. Then month 2 arrived and the listings stopped. It wasn't a sudden shift. It was more like the heat slowly getting turned down you don't notice until you're actually cold. Danielle stopped mentioning apartments. When I brought it up gently, she'd say something like, "I looked at one in Kitsilano, but the landlord wanted first and last, and I'm just not quite there yet." And I'd nod and say, "No rush, take your time." And then I'd go to bed and tell myself she was almost there. By the 3rd month, Danielle had quietly moved from the pull-out couch to my bedroom. She said her back was killing her and she'd sleep better in a real bed, just for a few nights. I moved to the couch in my own apartment. The few nights became 2 weeks. I stopped counting because counting made it feel more real. Zoe started calling my condo home when she talked about it to her friends. I heard her on the phone once saying I have to go home now when we were at the park, and I felt something twist in my chest that I couldn't name at the time. The rent in my building is $2,100 a month. I was paying it alone. Danielle had offered to contribute once she sorted out her accounts, but her accounts were always in the process of being sorted. I told myself it was fine. I made good money. I worked in UX design for a tech company downtown, fully remote by then, and my salary covered my costs. But then the costs started expanding. Groceries first. I used to spend maybe $300 a month on food. 2 adults and a growing child later, that number had quietly climbed to $650, then $720. I started going to Costco on Sundays, instead of my usual small shop. The cart was always full, and I was always the one paying, because Danielle would say she'd forgotten her wallet, or she'd get the next one. There was no next one. Then the electricity bill. My condo faces west and gets afternoon sun, so I'd never needed much heating or cooling before. With 3 people in the space, the bill jumped. Not dramatically, but it went from around $60 a month to just over $100. Then, $115. I noticed. I noted it and moved on. Then my internet plan. Danielle needed faster speeds for her bookkeeping work, she said. We upgraded. That was $30 more a month. Fine, I thought. She needs it for work. Then Zoe's after-school program. This one I want to tell carefully, because it's the moment I keep coming back to. Zoe was enrolled in a school near my condo, not her original school, which was in Burnaby, but a new one 2 blocks away that Danielle had transferred her to because it made more sense with where we are now. In January, 4 months in, the school offered an after-school art and drama program. $180 for the semester. Danielle mentioned it at breakfast. Zoe was sitting right there, eyes wide, talking about how her friend Priya was signing up and how they were going to do a play at the end. I paid for it. Of course I paid for it. Zoe was sitting right there. But that night I lay on my couch, in my apartment, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought, did Danielle mention this at breakfast on purpose? With Zoe right there? So I couldn't say no? I told myself I was being uncharitable. I went to sleep. My best friend is a woman named Kezia. We've known each other since university, where we both studied in the same building and bonded over terrible vending machine, coffee, and late deadlines. Kezia is the kind of person who will tell you exactly what she thinks, but gently enough that you don't realize how direct she's being until you're already nodding. In February, 5 months in, Kezia came to visit. I hadn't told her much about the living situation. I'd mentioned that Danielle was staying with me, that she was going through a hard time, that it was temporary. Kezia listened to all of that over text and didn't push. But when she came for dinner and saw the state of things, Danielle's clothes on my bedroom chair, Zoe's drawings taped to my fridge, the general feeling that the apartment had been quietly colonized, she didn't say anything until we were doing the dishes alone. How long has this been going on? She asked. 5 months, I said. Maybe 6 in a couple weeks. She put down the dish she was drying. Sophie, where do you sleep? I pointed at the couch. She looked at the couch. She looked at me. She didn't say anything else that night. But 2 days later, she texted me. Can I ask you something honestly? Always, I said. Do you know exactly how much this has cost you? Not a rough number, the actual number. I typed back that it wasn't a big deal, that I made enough, that Danielle was going through something hard. Kezia replied, that's not what I asked. I didn't answer. But I didn't stop thinking about it. It was a Saturday afternoon in March, when I finally sat down and opened a spreadsheet. I don't know what made that particular Saturday the one. Maybe it was that Danielle had a friend over that afternoon, a woman I'd never met who sat in my living room for 4 hours while I worked from my bedroom because it felt awkward to be in my own living room. Maybe it was that Zoe had accidentally knocked my favorite mug off the counter that morning and it had shattered, and Danielle said, "Oh no, poor thing," to Zoe, and handed her a tissue, and the pieces of my mug were just left on the counter for me to clean up. I opened the spreadsheet. I went back to October. I went through every bank statement, every credit card summary, every grocery receipt I'd photographed out of habit with my expense tracking app. I cross-referenced my Costco receipts. I pulled up my utility bills month by month. I found the after-school program confirmation email. I found the Uber rides I'd taken because Danielle had borrowed my car for the day and I needed to get to a client meeting. I found the cleaning supplies that had tripled. I found the 2 bottles of wine I'd bought because Danielle mentioned she liked that kind. Line by line. Month by month. October through March. It took me most of the afternoon. The number at the bottom of the sheet was $8,340. I sat with that number for a long time. It's not a number that sounds enormous at first. People spend more on vacations. But this wasn't a vacation. This was 6 months of someone living in my home, sleeping in my bed, eating my food, using my car and my internet and my electricity and my condo's parking spot, all without contributing a single dollar. And this was on top of my regular costs, which I was still carrying alone. $8,340. And I hadn't said a word. I called Kezia. "I have the number," I said when she picked up. She was quiet for a moment. "What is it?" I told her. She exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. "What are you going to do?" I didn't know yet. I knew I wasn't going to scream. I knew I wasn't going to send a Venmo request at midnight like some kind of passive-aggressive move. I knew that whatever I did, I needed to be calm, not cold calm. There's a difference. Cold comes from bitterness. Calm comes from clarity. "I think I need to have a conversation," I said. "With her?" "With her. And maybe with myself first." I spent the next week thinking about what I actually wanted. Not just from Danielle, from the situation, from the relationship, from myself going forward. Because here's the thing about being someone who avoids conflict. You can spend so much energy managing other people's emotions that you forget to ask yourself what you actually need. What I needed was my apartment back, my bedroom, my couch for guests, not for me, my grocery budget, my sense that my space was mine. What I wanted from Danielle was not repayment, though I kept the spreadsheet. What I wanted was acknowledgement. I wanted her to see what this had actually cost. Not just money, time, sleep, the quiet way I'd started working with headphones in because I needed some silence and couldn't find it. The way I'd stopped having friends over because the apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. I wrote everything down. Not a script, just notes, the things I wanted to say. And then, on a Sunday evening, after Zoe was asleep, I sat down at the kitchen table and asked Danielle to sit across from me. She knew something was coming. I could see it in the way she set down her tea carefully and folded her hands. "I need to talk to you about something," I said. "And I want to do it calmly, because I love you, and I want this conversation to go somewhere useful." She nodded. I opened my laptop. I turned it to face her. "This is a spreadsheet," I said. "I made it last week. It covers October through March." She looked at the screen. I watched her eyes move across the columns, dates, categories, amounts, groceries, utilities, internet upgrade, Zoe's program, car usage days, cleaning supplies. She didn't speak. "The total is $8,340, I said. "That's what it has cost me, in additional expenses, since you moved in 6 months ago. I'm not asking you to pay this back. I'm showing it to you because I need you to see it." Danielle looked at the screen for a long time. Then she looked up at me, and her eyes were wet. "Sophie, I'm not finished," I said gently. "I'm also sleeping on my own couch. I have been for almost 4 months. I gave you my bedroom because you said your back hurt. And I never asked for it back because I didn't want to make things harder for you. But I need my bedroom back. I need my apartment back." She pressed her fingers to her mouth. "I love you," I said. "I love Zoe. I would do a lot for you. But I need this to have a real end date. Not a few more weeks. A date. I need to know when you're leaving, and I need that date to be real." The silence in the apartment was very complete. When Danielle finally spoke, her voice was quiet and uneven. "I didn't realize," she said. "I mean, I knew it had been a while, but I didn't let myself add it all up. I think I just kept telling myself that you were fine, that you would say something if it was too much." "I know," I said, "and I should have said something sooner. That's on me too, but I'm saying something now." We talked for 2 hours that night. Not a fight, a real conversation, one of the hardest I've ever had, because it required me to stay calm, even when I could feel old patterns pulling at me, telling me to soften everything, to apologize for having needs, to say, "Never mind, it's fine, forget I said anything." I didn't do that. At the end of the conversation, Danielle told me she had actually found an apartment, had found it 3 weeks ago. In fact, but hadn't brought it up because she was nervous about managing the first and last month's deposit. The apartment was in East Van, close to Zoe's school. It was $1,650 a month. She had been sitting on this information for 3 weeks. I kept my face very still when she told me that. I asked her what the move-in date was. She said she could take possession on the 1st of April. That was 3 weeks away. Okay, I said. Then April 1st is the date. She moved out on April 3rd, 2 days late because of a scheduling thing with the moving company, which honestly felt very on brand. But I let it go because it was 2 days, not 2 months. Zoe hugged me at the door and told me to visit soon and asked if she could still call me. I told her she could call me whenever she wanted. I meant it. That part was the hardest. Zoe never did anything wrong. She was just a kid caught in the middle of adult circumstances, and she had been nothing but sweet to me for 26 months. Watching her carry Carrot out the door in her backpack made my chest hurt in a way I hadn't expected. But I stood at the window and watched their car pull away, and for the first time in a very long time, I exhaled completely. I walked to my bedroom, and stood in the doorway for a moment. There were still a few of Danielle's things on the shelf. A hair clip, a charger, a paperback she'd never finished. I put them in a bag to drop off to her later. I opened the window. I sat on the edge of my own bed, and I just sat there for a while. In the quiet. About 3 weeks after Danielle moved out, she called me on a Saturday morning. Not to ask for anything, just to call. She asked how I was. I asked how she was. She said the apartment was small, but she liked it. Zoe had made a new friend in the building who had a cat, which Zoe considered to be the greatest possible outcome. Danielle said, "I've been thinking about the spreadsheet." "Okay," I said. "I want to pay you back. Not all at once, I can't do that. But I want to start, even a little bit each month, because I don't want that number just sitting between us." I told her I'd think about it. And I did think about it. I thought about what the money meant and what the gesture meant, and I decided they weren't the same thing. The money was already spent. It was gone. Getting it back wouldn't undo the 4 months on the couch or the mornings I woke up stiff and tired before a full workday. But the gesture, the willingness to acknowledge it, to take responsibility, to not just let it disappear into the comfortable fog of family dynamics, where everyone pretends everything is fine that mattered. I told her she could start small. $100 a month, whenever she could. Not because I needed $100 a month, because accountability, even symbolic, is part of how things actually change. She sent the first transfer a week later. It's been 4 months since Danielle moved out. We talk more now than we did when she was living with me, which tells you something. Zoe calls me on Sunday evenings sometimes, just to tell me what she drew or what happened at school. Last week she told me that her class is doing a play and she got a part, and she wanted me to come watch. I told her I'd be there. My condo feels like mine again. I rearranged the furniture. I got a new mug to replace the one that broke. I've had Kezia over twice, and we actually sat in the living room without me feeling like a guest in my own home. The spreadsheet is still on my laptop. I don't open it very often. But I keep it there because I worked hard on it, and because it represents something I needed to learn, that keeping track of what things actually cost isn't selfish or petty or cold. It's just honest. For a long time, I confused being generous with being invisible. I thought love meant absorbing whatever someone else needed, without asking for anything in return. I thought asking for acknowledgement made me small, or ungrateful, or difficult. I was wrong. And I think a lot of people in this community know exactly what I mean by that. Here's what I want to say to anyone who recognizes any part of this story. You are allowed to know what things cost. Not just money, time, energy, sleep, peace. You are allowed to add it up. You're allowed to show someone the number. You are allowed to need your bedroom back. You are allowed to say this is the date and mean it. Being someone's family does not make you their safety net by default. Being generous does not mean being unlimited. Love is not the same as self-erasure. And if you've been sleeping on your own couch for 4 months without saying a word, that's not virtue. That's fear wearing the disguise of kindness. Boundaries are not walls. They're the thing that makes it possible to actually stay close to someone long-term without losing yourself in the process. The people who truly love you will adjust when you set them. The people who don't, well, the spreadsheet will tell you what you need to know about that too. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. This community means so much to me, and knowing that so many of you are carrying similar things, that someone out there pressed play on a Sunday morning and nodded along, that matters more than I can say. Like and subscribe if this reached you today, and I'll be back soon with another story.